Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're going to be talking about The Hapless Homesteader by T. Alex Ratcliffe. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and say is that I know this author. This is your disclaimer. We have talked before, and you may know him from the Shadow of the Conqueror book review that was done on this channel as a collaboration a couple of years back. So with that said, that's all that you're going to get. Also, this is going to be a very critical video, so that's the warning. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Leigh, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday video of the month, we bask in your creativity. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, and you submit it to the Fresh Meat feature. That is the first chapter and the cover. That first chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. That happens every Monday. That is not a Leigh day. And then the third way is if you would like me to read your full book and do what I'm basically doing today, and I will give you complete, full opinions, discussion of the story, and it'll either, it'll be whether I like it or not, you'll know. I don't go into books hoping to hate them. I just express what it is I experience. So just prepare yourself for that. If that's what you want, you can only submit your books or books that you're interested in me reading through the Discord. And then the third thing is, and if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Body More Zero, came out in October of last year, and my next coming novel, my next forthcoming novel should come out in November of this year. It will be The Legend of Bill Cassidy, Book 1. Get ready for that. With that said, let's get into this. Not only have I discussed Shadow of the Conqueror with T. Alex Ratcliffe, but Hapless Homesteader is part of a serial that is called Vaxdemic. I think this is book 1. The author also has a second series, and that is the Battle Games series. We read the first Battle Games book on Loin Stream last year. I think it was last. The author did request feedback on their books, and so this is where we are. I'm going to go ahead and start out saying that I am not particularly and have never been particularly interested in COVID fanfic, and that's what this pretty much looks like from the get-go, especially with the Vaxdemic as the headline or as the series name. It's always an interesting choice to me to include that in your story, especially, or even to write a story about it, because I don't know who wants to read a story about that situation. In the comments below, let me know what your thoughts are, because there's generally a reader for everything out there. I'm sure there are people that like to relive the pandemic in fiction. I don't. And I think I roll my eyes just as often when it comes up and it's just a passing thought as I do when 9/11 is mentioned and it's a passing thing or it's randomly a part of a plot line. But that's how I feel. I definitely think it's a choice. Obviously, there was that entire thing with the humanoid version of the virus, along with the follow-up to romancing the COVID, which also had to do with monkeypox. So there's something for everybody. And out of respect for all of the Bobs that I know that I respect in my life, I will be calling this character Knob, because Bobs everywhere do not deserve the insult of this. So he is Knob. Now, the briefest summary of this would be Knob is a shut-in who ends up being the last man on Earth, or ends up in a situation of last man on Earth where everybody just kind of disappears because of COVID, and then has to build a homestead to survive on because he won't just kill himself. The genres would be vibes. There is no genre to this. It's literally just vibes. The character has no motivation. He doesn't do anything. And that's going to come up in this review. So prepare thyself. With that said, let's get into the larger synopsis and go for the ride together, shall we? Now, before we actually get into the book, I would like to discuss the preface of this book, because I personally find it pretty insulting. Quote, "Welcome, everyone. Just a few words before the story begins. First, this story follows a what-if scenario. It's not meant to be political, just a story based on a controversial topic. This started as a weekly series where the main character was presented different challenges to his survival. His solutions are as accurate as I could make them. I will, however, caution anyone from trying these solutions for themselves without the help of of an expert. Sadly, our main character has no such convenience. Second, while this story does use various conspiracy theories as a jumping off point, this is not an endorsement of any position. Again, it's just a story. It's meant to be fun. There are no great messages, no personal beliefs, and no preachings to one thing or another. While it was unable to completely escape some of my personal thoughts, that is to be expected. I'm the author. Third, this book is not predicting anything. It's a work of fiction. With all of that said, enjoy the story and join me in wishing Nob good luck. Now, there's going to be a question. I'm going to ask it now so I don't forget it later, but he starts building stuff in his neighborhood, like rewiring electricity to 15 windmills that he builds in a week. Like, he starts rewiring electricity and relaying pipes for things, and the question came up of why didn't he just use the infrastructure that was literally already there? He just had to restart building all these things when the infrastructure was literally there for him to just go and take advantage of. It was easier for him to build everything from scratch than to use infrastructure that already existed. I don't know. Anyway, to this message, I can't help but feel insulted and talked down to right away because of this, and told not to trust the author and the writing of this book because it's a COVID book called Vaxdemic, and it immediately reads as political to me. You let me know if you have a different response to the idea of Vaxdemic, but that already feels like coded language, for lack of better terms, because there was so much political fighting and divide around this specific thing during 2020 and even after that, and it even still rages on today. Now, I'm asking you guys about it because clearly I have my own perspective, I have my own biases, but I want to know the opinions of other people on this as well. But from the information alone of Vaxdemic and COVID, would you have guessed that this was going to have at least some sort of political leaning in it? Because the author also says, hey, it's not political, but also it will have some of my opinions in it because there's no getting away from that. So then just don't make the message. To me, it feels like this note takes the reader as being too stupid to read a book. If it's not just the author trying to be cheeky with, tee-hee-hee, this is totally political, but I'm going to say it's not political, just like all of the other things straight out of Hollywood that are political, but they say are not political. It's also trying too hard in that second paragraph, and I'm sorry, your personal beliefs will be in this story one way or another because there is no way out of it, especially when you, the author, know that the character is a self-insert of a sort. Also, it's giving me vibes of, at the front of Sam Fenna's book, there was also a message that said, hey, these are not the author's opinions, but then it's trying too hard. Look, I'm not going to assume a book is carrying the author's opinions on something until the book tells me, BT dubs, don't think too hard about this. I wasn't going to think that it was your opinions, and now you have brought my attention to that, and now I am thinking that you are trying to pull one over me. Also, the sentence, quote, completely escaped from my personal thoughts. That is to be expected. I'm the author. Feels definitely like it's talking down to the reader. Like it's saying, you don't know what authors do, but trust me, this is just what we do and I know better. It's not a good way to start off a book by talking down to your potential readers or by the person who opened your book if they've already purchased it. But let me know what you think when it comes to prefaces like this. Now, with that said, let's actually jump into the plot. Starting out as normal so you can get an idea of the way that the story is written, here is the first page. Quote, my name is Nob. Nob Stacky is the name on my mailbox, and it's been a while since anything has run around here. When the pandemic hit, I was a shut-in, so my life didn't change much. As a freelance programmer, I never had to leave my house. Companies just sent me the specs, and I would work in my office with blackout curtains drawn. If anything, the lockdowns were great for me. I could get groceries delivered to my house, and they would just leave them at the door. I never had to so much as look at another person again. In my free time, I played games, anything strategy. I had a Steam library with over 1,000 games. My favorites had well over 1,000 hours logged. I never paid much attention to the news. There was some big hubbub about the election that I didn't vote in. Then the vaccine was made, and they all said, get the vaccine if you want to re-enter society. I didn't care about society, so I didn't bother with the vaccine. And anyways, getting it would mean leaving my house. I tried my best to ignore the internet fights. One side said that they were safe and everyone should get one. The other side said that they were dangerous and no one should get one. I didn't know, and I didn't care. Things started getting weird in the summer. My food bill suddenly got really high. I made more than enough to not care, but it was odd enough to make me call the store. The managers said that they were having trouble getting deliveries. But they didn't expect the prices to stay high for too long. I shrugged it off and went back to life as usual. So we're already jumping headfirst into this what looks like a clown world setup, where Nob has checked out of society and doesn't want anything to do with anything and hates everyone. That will be consistent throughout the story. If you think he's going to get better, he's not. He continually hates society. I can't imagine why he's single and alone, but I guess he doesn't really care either for the most part. At this point, when I'd first opened the book, I hoped that we were going to get to see character development, especially putting him through some sort of hard time, but there's no character development, so don't get your hopes up. I also wondered immediately, once society fell apart and there was no way to do anything, why he didn't kill himself, because he literally showed no drive to exist or any reason for why he would want to stay alive. So, like, why not end it? The price of groceries is up. By the end of November, he doesn't. So it just speed runs. I should mention, all of this is written in a form of a journal entries, so it's just telling you things the entire time. So there is that. Now, speed run up to the end of November, and he doesn't have a job or deliveries coming to his house anymore. So he's like, I don't even hear my neighbors fighting anymore. That's weird, but I don't really care about anything, so I'm really not going to ask any questions. He is disconnected from everything, and he doesn't even look at social media, apparently, or any of the news. And nobody in his office, I guess, like, uses Slack to talk about this stuff like you would expect. He just wakes up, plays Steam games, calls Uber Eats, sleeps, and repeats for a while, with somehow avoiding literally any discussion of anything at work or online. I don't know how. He realizes that since no one is bringing him stuff anymore, that he's going to have to go out, and he's going to have to go and do the worst thing in his life, which is leaving his house. He realizes that his neighbors are all gone and the neighborhood is completely empty, but has literally no thoughts about it. Quote, I never cared about them before, so why start now? I couldn't even tell you their names unless I looked at their mailboxes. What did concern me was the lack of power and my lack of food. I decided to go to the store. This is just some non-thought from this guy. You'd think that there'd be some sort of survival instinct or curiosity at all, that he'd be like, what the frick? Maybe check for an evacuation notice for somewhere, or to pick up his phone when he's leaving, but conveniently, he doesn't have his phone on him. A character who just goes, meh, I don't really care, everyone is gone, I hate everyone, doesn't really have anything compelling him forward or compelling me to want to know anything about them. They are just flat. They are uncaring. There's nothing interesting about them. He's not good at anything. He's just a hateful asshole. And why would I read anything about this guy? Can you make this sort of thing work? Of course. I'm thinking about a character like Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, so I guess if this character was going to go through and realize how disconnected he is and then go through that character development, then you could make it work. That's not what this does, though. You tell me if it's worth it by the time we get to the end. So the dude gets in his car, hoping that the gas hasn't gone sour since he hasn't driven in a couple of months. There's nothing about the battery possibly dying from not turning his car on. It doesn't really matter because the car starts. He thinks about how hard driving is when you haven't driven in a couple of months, and I'm thinking that Knob is just dumb and incompetent at this point because it's not hard, especially when it's empty. Like when I was a teenager learning how to drive, it was not even hard. Knob gets to the grocery store, however far away it is. The doors are locked, the power is out, but the emergency lights are on, and all Knob can think of is, maybe they're also affected by the power outage. Guess I should break in and see if there's anyone in there and who doesn't hear me yodeling outside from the porch. He is such an antisocial guy who lacks any sort of situational awareness or thinking ability that he can't see the emergency lights. I don't know how many cars are in the parking lot there, if there were any cars whatsoever. Why hasn't the place been ransacked by the rest of the fall of society? Like, it's literally empty Earth when it shouldn't be, and it's like aliens came and just zapped everybody up, except you're going to find like one or two random people in houses in his neighborhood, and then a bunch of people in the hospital, but you're not going to find any sign of life literally anywhere else in this world. And it is so bizarre because you would think he'd be like, oh, there were no cars in the parking lot. That's weird. Why would there not be cars in the parking lot? Wouldn't people have possibly been trying to fight each other? Maybe when this pandemic thing was like gearing up, they would have been like fighting each other, and you could have had the doors to the place just like doing this thing on them the entire time because somebody just died rapidly in front of the door. But there's just nobody. And so then it ends up, not only does it not make sense, it ends up just feeling lazy because now it's like, well, there's no world building. I didn't want to have to figure out how to do any of this or what the world looked like when it started falling apart. So now it's just all completely blank slate. Since he decides he's too hungry to go home without getting food, he finds the cart entrance and sees that he can just crawl into the cart entrance. So he walks inside and decides that, if somebody gets him in trouble for trespassing, then he'll explain what's happening. He goes in, grabs food, and leaves. There is no comment about what the inside of the store looks like, no observation about the store. He doesn't go looking around for any employees. There's no mention of anything inside of the store, any rotten smells in the store, food, animals, nothing. Again, it's just It's just lazy and blank and undeveloped. So the dude takes food, goes home without thinking anything of anything, and he just wishes that he had his phone with him. But it's at home on the charger, since he doesn't use it for anything but making phone calls. So you would think that he would have remembered to grab it. Meanwhile, he apparently lost power at his house some time ago, but somehow his phone is charging for him at his house. It also makes you wonder if there was any food in his house whatsoever when the power went out, and what the frick has he been eating since the power has gone out? And I don't know, this book, it doesn't even try to create a setting. And so then you just end up with all these questions of like, well, how is he living? Well, it doesn't matter because he lives in the moment. There are no rules. So the dude said that if he had his phone, he'd be checking for power outages, messages, anything in the area to tell him what's going on. But since he's out of power at his house too, how is it charging? And how does he even have service? Or how does he think that he's going to have service? Because I can tell you, when we were power outed here with the hurricane, service was garbage. And don't those cell towers also take power? Excuse me if I'm an idiot in this, but you get the warning at the beginning of the video. He also says that he only uses his phone to make phone calls, to which he's never received a call from anyone that wasn't a telemarketer, so he's pretty much never used his phone before. Yet he's got a smartphone. Why would you pay the expensive price, the expensive premium for a smartphone if all you need is a flip phone? Just get the flip phone. Are you not somebody who's talking about being efficient, but you can't just get the cheaper phone? He gets home, walks around in the dark house to find his phone, checks for any news about what's going on because he apparently has internet, because that's a plot device that he has a smartphone just for that. Dude has no comment about his lack of signal, but maybe the tower is down. It's not even a gone signal, it's just a low signal, though it seems everything loads just fine because he's not struggling to open web pages, and he is describing what he is seeing. Finally, he gets onto a local news website. Quote, I tried to check the local news sites. The newest story was about 3 weeks old. The headline read, "Hospitals full, acting governor tells people to shelter in place and wait for a response to chaos." I stopped eating. Chaos? Was he talking about the weird stuff the neighbors were doing? I read the article. The acting governor has issued a statement advising residents to stay in their homes and not bring relatives to the hospital as they are overcrowding and there are not enough staff to care for them. Residents are also advised to store any bodies to the best of their abilities until the government workers can pick them up. Please follow the link below for emergency preservation techniques for bodies. If things were actually this bad, would you not receive like a national thing on your phone? Because I've received them for smaller things than this. I've even received statewide things all the time for like a lost old person or obviously Amber Alerts. Would there not be something like that for this sort of situation getting this far out of control? I still don't know how we can look up this stuff without any power. And quote, I tried a national news site. It didn't load. I tried another, same problem. I tried one more and this one finally loaded. There was an article about 2 weeks ago. Madness spreads in both vaccinated and unvaccinated. That didn't make sense. Wouldn't it be the one or the other? It had been discovered that the madness caused by microstrokes due to blood clotting caused by the mRNA vaccine is not confined to vaccinated people. It appears that merely having contact with the bodily fluids of a vaccinated individual is enough for the effect to spread. The interim government has released a statement that if you have had intercourse, a blood transfusion, or even kissed a person who has received a vaccine, that you are at risk or should take preventative steps. Please follow the link below to see what you can do to protect yourself. And the dude thinks, quote, was that what was going on? I knew my neighbors had been arguing about the vaccine. I could hear them in the streets months ago shouting at each other. I guess they may have been doing more than that. Surely they all couldn't have been vaccinated or sleeping with someone who was. Not like I would know. I've barely spoken to anyone since college, almost a decade ago. They weren't exactly celibate back then either. Maybe they were doing more than I thought. So even before the stuff of COVID, he was somehow a complete shut-in with his job, even though COVID was something that like exacerbated being able to stay at home and having the things delivered to you somehow even before. And also was the thing that gave more people the ability to stay at home. It didn't really set up how he was this level of disconnected before COVID, and kind of just acts like it's all been the same thing since COVID, where he somehow just had the world work with his complete shut-in lifestyle. And I was having a very hard time with believability to this. Like, he didn't use Slack, he didn't use Zoom, he wasn't brought into any sort of conversation as a freelancer or as somebody working for a company where he had to talk to his clients at some point. Why was this book trying so hard to have him have zero connections to anyone to the point of nonsense when he obviously had outside stuff going on before COVID? And I say, why is this book doing it when it just comes off as sheer laziness, because then you don't have to develop connections to other people. It's like making the choice to kill off a character's parents so you don't have to determine the relationship or develop a relationship between the character and their parents. Now, that's not saying that every time a character has dead parents that it is an act of laziness. It's whether or not the author is developing the world around the character or not shows that. And I am not seeing an action that I am not seeing writing that expresses that the world is being designed around this character. It's the barest minimum to create a narrative. And this book is also marked as this being November 10th, 2021. So I guess in this universe, COVID possibly started in 2021 instead of 2020. He hooks up his phone to his charger as it hits 50% and hopes that there is power back tomorrow, so it'll charge again, I guess. Mostly anticipation, I suppose. He wakes up, power is still out, and he decides to check on his neighbors. No one answers as he starts yelling into the neighborhood, and the writing is just glunky. Quote, I tried yelling. I normally don't talk much since I don't see many people. Yelling was hard, and my throat started to hurt very quickly. Either they couldn't hear me or they couldn't answer. I looked around to see if any other neighbors reacted to my yelling, but there was no one. And also reminding us again that he doesn't talk very often, period, especially not to people, somehow before the current era. Establishing nobody is talking to him, he decides to break into a house via a basement, hurting himself by accident. Don't worry though, he presses on. He analyzes the basement for how unlike his neighbors he actually is. Quote, I listened and didn't hear any footsteps above me. The basement was filled with the kind of junk all basements are filled with, except mine. Tools, inner tubes, fans, random boxes of junk. Is filled with the kind of stuff that all basements are filled with, except for mine. What the He's not like other suburbanites, folks. Note, he also announces that he doesn't use his upper floors in his house either. He just uses the ground floor and the upper floors are all storage. He goes upstairs in this house and finds it all clean, but the food is rotting. And quote, none of the appliances were on since the power was still off. I moved up to the next floor. Thank you for the redundancy that all of the appliances are off because the power is still off. He investigates the rooms upstairs, no description in any of them, just parents' rooms and two rooms that seemingly belong to kids. Quote, the two kids' rooms were easier to identify. One had a game console and the other a laptop. If I had to guess, they belonged to a boy and a girl, respectively. There was just no one here. I decided to try my neighbors to the left. So what exactly gave away that one was a boy and one was a girl? How was it not like both were girls or both were boys, or like, because there was no description of the room. So what exactly made one feel like one and one feel like the other? Anything. Like, this entire thing should be about describing the horrors of what you see, the unease of being in this empty world, but there is nothing here. He leaves the house noting that it's easier to leave than it was to get in because he can just unlock the door from the inside. And when he leaves, he doesn't have a lock, or doesn't have a key, so he can't lock the door when he leaves. Thank you. We really needed that. He goes to another neighbor's house and can't get in. Goes back to that first house, finds a crowbar, comes back, tries to break the door open, can't, and decides to break a window to get inside. He's so weak that he can't break the window using a crowbar, even after 2 swings. He blames desk work. This place smells of rot, and it's because he finds 2 rotting old dead people somewhere in the house. The smell makes him vomit. He has no comment on them being dead or rotted or having seen bodies. Not that it's weird, not that it's strange to find that, not that he should try calling 911 with his phone back at his house that still has 50% power. He doesn't think anything. He doesn't have a comment, period. He drinks water, keeps looking through the house, and decides if he finds another set of corpses, then he is going to stop looking. So this all seems expected to him, even if he doesn't know what's going on, because he has no comment on any of the dead people being left to rot. Is it normal? This is the part where world building comes in, and in some ways it also makes me think of The Hate U Give, where the story relied on just assuming you had information to input into the story instead of building the story within the book, and so you would connect it with things that were going on in real life. but it didn't build into the story. He goes back to the supermarket where he got food from before to get something to eat or drink. And he's thinking now, what if I'm the last person alive? How will I survive? Question, why would you want to? And why is it not celebrate? And why is he not celebrating the end of society and people as he knows it? Because everyone appears to be gone and he didn't like them anyway. Zero reaction at all to literally anything. While driving home, he runs into an old woman named Ruth, who is just glad to have found another person. For some reason, this old woman thought that he wouldn't understand her, even though they're in the same neighborhood. As I note, Ruth, run for your life. Quote, I don't think I like Ruth. We don't have much in common. From what I can gather, she's your typical old church lady, at least until the state decided to shut down the churches. Ruth is 70 years old and a widow. Her husband died 4 years ago. They used to own a farm that was foreclosed on in the 2000s. That's when they moved less than a mile from the house that I would one day buy. He only agreed to let her come with him so that she could tell him what's happened to everything. Ruth asks him to go and get food from the store so that she can cook. Cook how? They don't have power. Does she have a way to cook now? I guess that it's from the list of things that she gave him to bring back like a stove of some kind. Even though it's going to benefit Nob, he doesn't really want to go to the store and just argues with her until he finally folds. He says that he feels bad now taking things from the store, almost feeling like he's a thief, almost, but he hasn't hit his quota yet on taking things that make him feel bad. Side note, more thought had been put into that moment than running into dead people. He robs a sports store for everything that he needs, and he comes across the gun section. Quote, then I came to the guns. I'd never even held a gun before, but every zombie movie I'd ever seen told me that they were important. I jumped behind the counter and start to browse. As I completed my first pass, I noticed none of the labels said anything like assault rifle, sniper rifle, or SMG. All names I'm familiar with through the media. The ammo wasn't much better. Most were labeled with numbers. I recognized 9mm, but was stumped by 380 ACP and 223/5.5/5.56. The numbers rang some bells, but I'm not sure if I understood which gun they went to. On my second pass, I saw a 12-gauge shotgun and felt the thrill of excitement. A 12-gauge, I knew what that was. The ammo type was right in the name. It didn't take long before I found a box of ammo labeled 12-gauge. He takes some guns and figures that, and Ruth will be able to tell him about it since she used to live at a farm and farm people know about guns. It's just now as he steals a bunch of things from this store and makes multiple trips out to his car that he starts to think that he may never have to pay for any of this stuff ever again. And he also curses how all of the movies made him think that at the end of the world these stores would be looted, but obviously they're not. It makes you wonder, if everybody just disappeared one day, like how did these stores not get looted, period, when they knew what was coming? He gets back and Ruth asks him if she can have a room downstairs in the house because she's old and he's young and she can't climb the stairs. He complains again about how weak he is when he is trying to move the mattress upstairs, and also how Ruth has moved more bags in than he did when emptying out the car, because she is much stronger than he is apparently. I guess he is meant to be super pathetic, but how is it that his muscles have atrophied so bad that this 70-year-old woman can carry more bags from the store than him? And this is just a couple of months. He really did nothing but lay in bed, pee, and video game, to the point that he disabled himself. He and Ruth spend time together after she makes dinner. She tells him about the family having a falling out. Then he goes upstairs to his new bed where he goes through his old emails because that's all that he can see with no signal. It's all work emails though, so he closes it and thinks about how he didn't have a falling out with his family. He just stopped participating with them because he just didn't find it important to talk to any of them anymore. They always asked him to do things and he'd always tell them no until one day they just stopped inviting him out to do things. He wonders if his family is still alive, and hopefully they are, because if it was just him and Ruth alive, then that would be pretty pitiful and the end of humanity. You would think that there might be more thought on this. Maybe having an existential crisis of sorts with like, what is my purpose? What is the purpose of anything when everybody is dead? What even is there? But there's not. That's pretty much where that ends. And why does he care about humanity? He didn't care about his own family, and he's not suddenly finding that he had importance with his family or cared about his family or wished he spent more time with his family. There is literally no thought about any of this other than, I guess I had a falling out with my family because I just stopped participating. Oh well. In the next chapter, he's mad at Ruth for asking him to go foraging to find more things, and he keeps going, what's in it for me if I go and do this, when he's literally benefiting from it because she's feeding him and keeping him alive. He could just sit here and starve once all of the food in the store goes bad, which, whatever, it could be a while for some of the canned goods to go bad if they're all just in there because nobody ransacked anything and there's nobody else going through anything. Whatever. Ruth is taking care of him, though, and he still asks, what's in it for me? Some of the other things that she mentions needing him to bring are things to have hot baths and winter clothes because it's November. She makes him lunch to take out with him on his foraging, and he complains about that too, saying that he feels like she's treating him like a child by giving him a lunch to take to work. She's doing things for you. Be grateful. There is no way that this character can for 1 second just be grateful that anybody cares about him. Quote, my relationship with Ruth is weird. She sends me off to find all of this stuff, but when I'm around, she treats me like a kid. The day that she sent me out for clothes, she packed me a lunch. I threw it in my back seat, feeling insulted. I wasn't a child, but after spending hours trying to break into the mall, I had to admit that I was happy to have it. She was far too happy for my liking to hear that I had ate it, and told me the next day to find a good lunchbox so that she could make sure that I'd get enough to eat. She'll often scold me for not changing my clothes or leaving things out. It's really hard to argue with her. I yelled at her once, and she treated me like a fussy kid. She does make sure that we have hot meals in the morning and evenings, and she does keep the house clean. The house even smells different with her here, like lemon and pine needles. He can be a brat, whatever, but excuse me? Wives often make food for their partner. Grandparents make food. Siblings make food. How is this babying? And she's taking care of him, and he is just mad about it. I wonder why he has no friends. I don't think he's completely alone just because of... I think he has no friends, no family, nobody talking to him, period, because he's so negative, and there's no benefit to being around this guy. Down to him bringing a gun to kill this woman because he's just annoyed at her being there and sees her existence as a bother. Continuing to get supplies, he comes to an area with a bunch of rotting corpses and a car and a message from someone that says, don't come here, we can't feed you, go away. He wants to learn how to use a gun, but whatever he brought back from the store the first time is too strong for him, and he cries about the bruising, and Ruth tells him that he needs to get something weaker next time he goes out. He's then in another store getting things, and some random dogs show up and chase him. He struggles to open some cat food bag when there is a pull tab there, but he struggles for 10 minutes not seeing that it's there. He also thinks for a second that he hopes cat food is somehow poisonous to dogs. And I'm like, what are you, like mid-20s, late early 30s, and you think that cat food is going to be poisonous to dogs? Because he's like, oh, that would just be a good thing. Idiot. I'm wondering how old this guy is and where he got his education. Because what, he's at least finished grade school to get a remote job? Once he jumps off this platform that he's on, the dogs do follow him, but they're friendly. He says that he's never had a dog, complains about the neighbor's dogs being too loud, and then says he feels bad leaving them behind, even if he doesn't want. The boy has a collar and is named Rusty. The girl doesn't have a collar, so he gets to name her. And I wonder why that is. Why does the girl not have a collar, but the boy has a collar, and he is ownershiping the girl dog, but not the boy dog? I do not understand what this man's background is in anything. He is so clueless about everything, yet had a high-level job. Maybe he was literally just an idiot, but he feels like an alien pretending to be a human. He's been hoping that Ruth wouldn't like the dogs when he got back so that she would get rid of them because he is such a pansy. But Ruth likes the dogs. The girl dog he names Abigail, and that girl dog is following him around and is obsessed with him. Of course she is. Wish fulfillment. You can only have the women, and the women are going to be obsessed with your male character. She is also named after his romance choice character from Stardew Valley, and I'm sitting here sweating at the names both Abigail and Ruth being here. If you know, you know. It's only a little bit... It's just one of those things that makes you go, He complains about his computer not being anything anymore since it won't power on, and how he misses the internet. I kind of like, what do you miss about it? Because you weren't doing anything but playing video games sometimes, so you don't miss the internet. You more miss your strategy games because the internet just allows you to talk to people, and you hate talking to people. Now he can't find gas anywhere he goes, so he's looking around for a bike and complains about the costs of them, and he grabs the most expensive bikes that he can find because he thinks he deserves it, and he grabs 3 of them just to own the man. He says that he specifically went to the catalog to see which ones were the most expensive so he could just steal the most expensive ones because... Now, Ruth has Nob take her back to her place so that she can get some things, and he's like, oh boy, she's moving in now. So he's not even like, this should be expected because we're both alone, or thank God because I don't want to be alone. Nah, Nob is like, shit, Again, idiocy. She reminisces about life that she lost on the farm, and this reminds Nob to ask about what happened and why everyone is gone because he hasn't done that yet. Quote, I can't quite process the story she told me. Early in fall, more people started falling ill. The government tried to mandate everyone get vaccines. This led to protests, walk-off, and a lot of unrest. Both sides were at each other's throats, and it wasn't long before violence broke out. Then the microstrokes started. Soon, people of all ages were starting to lose their memories and control of their motor skills. There was already a labor shortage, but soon it was worse as so many people lost the majority of their motor skills. At first, they thought that it must be the virus. That idea lasted a week till the first dozen autopsies. It didn't take long to discover that all of the new people dying had massive blood clot issues. The blood cells were sticking to each other until they ran into obstructions. Then the die-off started. In the course of a week, almost 500,000 people died. The next, 1 million. Then the count stopped. Some doctors went online and claimed to have proof that it was the vaccine. He was arrested, and during a perp walk, one of the officers escorting him dropped dead from a stroke. After that, the news went silent. The government tried to lock things down, but word got out that they had proof that it was the vaccine. Then they came out with the truth. The vaccine was indeed the cause, and what was worse, it was spreading from person to person. They tried to organize the drug companies to find a solution, but their scientists died faster than they could be replaced. Ruth said that it seemed like every day there was a new news anchor. Then the insanity hit. One day, with little explanation, people started taking to the streets, not to protest or fight. They wandered around. Some screaming, some sobbing, others just talking. But every night they would return to their houses. Ruth assumed that the idea of home must have been strong. She told me how she saw what must have been the same neighbors packing up and leaving at night, driving off to God knows where. The next day it all happened again. Most of the news stations were off the air by this point. Ruth said she even saw a few military vehicles drive by one day. Soon everything went quiet. No more insane people, or people leaving, or vehicles at all. Then the power went out, and shortly after that is where we met. How in the frick did all of this happen and there was zero looting, zero disarray, zero anything? How did he not hear anything? How did he not get any emails from his bosses saying, hey, this stuff is going to crazy town, we can stop? How did he get no text messages from the government, any calls from the government, anything where he heard nothing? How did this happen in such a vacuum? It makes zero sense. Now, after all of that, Bro goes to bed and decides that he needs to figure out how to live. But that's going to be easy enough because he's smart, even if he is not strong. And I'm like, bruh, where have you proven you're smart? He says he's going to teach himself about gas power and how to be an electrician all on his own. Cool story, bro. Just know that means that he's going to accomplish everything he wants, and there's going to be no issues. And yeah, I've already, at this point, I'm reading Avalon Timefall again, which there's a review on this channel if you want to watch Avalon Timefall. That is a dude with a photographic memory, goes back in time to the Salem witch trials, and builds his own man cave in that time period. And that includes, a TV, a refrigerator, he makes microchips and everything for himself. And I'm like, why do you need a TV in the 1600s when you're not going to have any channels, any movies, anything? I don't know. He made himself a TV, and he made penicillin, and he made everything. And he was never accused of being a witch. What did Julie get? She got accused of being a witch and got sexually harassed and raped, and she just existed. Thanks for that, Michael. But if this book is going to call him smart, at least show it. I mean, whatever. The character has a big ego. He is going to think he's smart because he doesn't talk to other people, which makes him feel like he's at the top of the mountain when really, bro, if you talk to other people, you'll realize that you don't know anything. So he tries to take gas from a gas station, but can't figure out how, has to return home, and then he goes to a university library to try and get information. But the books that he picks up tell him to use websites for more information, and then he goes to the university bookstore. I don't know how that ended up being the thing for the freaking library, because school libraries, especially depending on the type of library, have decades upon decades, and that includes theses by previous students. I have my thesis. I'm not even a top of the class. It was just because it was a master's program. My thesis is in my school library because they put your thesis in your school library once you graduate. or once you submit your thesis. His dog Abigail immediately starts tearing apart the mascot stuffed animals in the university bookstore, and he opines how there isn't enough books in this university bookstore. It's mostly clothes or whatever. I don't know, dude. My university bookstore had rows upon rows upon rows of textbooks, and this feels like a political thing to me about how universities are basically like Barnes & Noble, where Barnes & Noble are basically toy stores. He goes through multiple buildings and finds pretty much nothing of use and comments, quote, "I'm a little disappointed. I thought that I would be coming back with stacks of books that I could use to fix all of our problems. The disaster movies always played up the angle of knowledge being the key to rebuilding society. I don't think that the people of Hollywood had seen the state of modern textbooks." Not political. Though he doesn't find anything on campus, he does see a sign for a used bookstore and immediately is able to find it off campus. There, he finds all of the books to the point that he's like, quote, "It's like a library in the 90s. How is that different from a modern library, I wonder? Also, the university archives do have old books. You should... There's also, I haven't been to a city library, especially the biggest branch of the city library, that doesn't have books that are about, like, the background of the city, that don't have historical books, because there's been a historical wing in almost every library that I have ever been in. Not saying that it is every library, but every town I've been in has had a library with a historical branch. Anyway, they also just carry old book. In this bookstore, he finds everything that he needs about electrical work and engineering and the like, and he leaves with all of that. He goes to a gas... He goes and collects gas, gets back, and Ruth makes him a cake to celebrate his success. He feels insulted again by her making him a cake because he's like, "She's treating me like a child, wah!" Even though he enjoys eating the cake. He doesn't say thank you, though. Then he goes upstairs to do his homework via studying the textbooks. Ruth comes up to check on him, sees his journal, and asks about it. Quote, "She laughed at me, but it didn't feel as mean as it could." Why did she ask about his journal and then start laughing at him? Why was that necessary? Even this just seems to be caustic for the point of being caustic, like the author perspective in general is just caustic and everything is nasty and everybody is nasty. And maybe you could say that Nob is just reading caustic into everything because that's how he is, and he distrusts everybody, and he thinks everything is negative, but nothing is happening. All he does is complain. We're halfway through this book almost, and he is still just complaining about everyone. He has no change in perspective. Even to just be like, "I'm glad I'm not alone. I'm glad this person exists to be cooking for me." He's got none of that. He then returns to the store to pick up electrical tools, all of them, and brings them back. I don't know what his plans were for collecting a bunch of electrical tools when he doesn't have electricity, unless he's like, "I'm going to hook something up to the gas generator that will let me use the electrical tools." But it's a gas generator that they won't have the gas for when all of the gas is bad, or have they used it already? It just doesn't matter. And it's not trying to build out any of the story or any of the world building because it's just telling it in journal entries, and he's getting exactly what he needs when he needs it with no struggle because every scene just has him solving immediately what he's trying to do. The dude just intuits his way through pulling a car apart, which he has never done before, and finding the pieces that he needs to build windmills to create powers, for which he also intuits his way through. He apparently is such a shut-in that he didn't realize that pipes can be made out of different materials, and he finds out when he is looking at them at the store, quote, "Apparently, the different metal pipes at the hardware store have more differences than color. Some of the pipes I've been using take forever to put holes in. Others just give way with few seconds of drilling. I've also noticed that some are starting to rust, while others don't seem bothered being outside." But he's just going to intuit his way into building something out of that too. Oh yeah, and he complains about how much he hates biking, and he can't believe that anyone ever did it for fun by choice. The chapter ends with, quote, "All of these differences and new problems are starting to get annoying. Who knew that there was so much to consider with building materials? I used to picture the hardware stores just being full of wood, tools, and pipes. Now I find out each has their own specific use for specific situations. I'm beginning to question everything I'm doing. Are these bolts going to work, or are they going to last? What if I can't use them with these types of pipings? Can't the pipes hold up what I need them to? Life was so much easier when I could just pay someone to fix things for me." The narrative at this point was feeling like Dora the Explorer, and the character is just talking at the reader is like, "Do you know how many materials pipes are made of? How many materials are there? That's right, plastic. What's another material that pipes can be made out of? That's right, metal. Good job. Do you know any specific type of metal that they can be made of? Iron. Wow, good job. That's what it feels like. And I don't understand who this book is trying to talk to, since it's just kind of talking down. I don't know who would find appeal in that, but we're gonna pause it for now. It's now getting close to be around Christmas, and Nob is being as much a Scrooge as he normally is. Quote, Ruth, on the other hand, is a Christmas nut. When I came home, the inside of the house was full of garland and evergreen. It turns out Ruth is one of those weird people born on Christmas, so she really gets into the holiday. She even found a fake tree in one of the neighbors' houses and put it up in the living room. She strung lights on it, but none of them were on. That's when she handed me a blank piece of paper and told me to make a list of things I wanted for Christmas. I thought this was patronizing, but I did my best to not show what I thought. I assumed that she was going to try and get me a Christmas gift, but I couldn't think of anything that she could get for me. I wrote down some things I wanted for dinner, one thing being ham. We have meat, our canned meat to be exact. I'm getting really tired of canned chicken and canned sea chicken, also known as tuna. The only thing I really want is some not canned meat. I was almost hesitant to give her back the list since I knew that she would never find any. How is it patronizing to ask somebody what they want for Christmas when you're trying to make the best of the end of the world situation and he just assumes the worst of what she is when she's trying to be considerate and welcoming and normal? On top of that, there's canned ham. How have they not found any canned ham when obviously nothing in the grocery store has ever been touched before? I hate this character so much. I hate being stuck with this whiny, ungrateful prick who wants for nothing, and when people try to make his life easier, he's just like, ugh, they're being patronizing to me. Yeah, you deserve to be alone, buddy. You don't even deserve your dog, which he didn't want in the first place. I don't even get at this point, we're almost halfway through and I don't even get what keeps him going, because he doesn't even have a drive to survive. He doesn't have a drive to achieve. He doesn't have anything. He then gets annoyed that Ruth gives him a Christmas list of things that she wants, which is chocolate and a power converter. So she doesn't even want anything that's just for her. I mean, she wants the chocolate, which is not going to be hard to find. You go into the grocery store and it's literally right there. He hasn't claimed any of the chocolate before. Going out, he keeps running into animals and getting spooked. Ruth keeps telling him that he needs to get a gun that he can actually handle. Since he is such a pansy, he can't handle anything that he brought home. He finally does. Finally. And then he goes on to Ruth's list, and I don't know why the narrative does this. Quote, I left the candy aisle alone for the most part and stuck to Ruth's list. I wish that I had gotten to it earlier. The candy aisle is a complete wreck. I left the aisle alone and went to the candy aisle. Why was that even the narrative choice in this? It's literally like this is a first draft the author never revised. Looked at a second time to clip. I mean, even going back to the very first sentence, when the dude is like, my name is Knob Stackley, whatever it is. My name is Knob Nobley. Knob Nobley is the name on my mailbox. You could have literally just started the book with Knob Naley is the name on the mailbox, and it wouldn't have been as repetitive. This just does not even try to edit. So of course, despite all of the other aisles apparently being fine, this one is ransacked because he didn't mention this is the grocery store he'd been to a million times before, even the first time when it was emergency lights on, and he did not say anything about it being a mess. So why is it either all of the sudden a mess, or he is only just now recognizing it's a mess and he had no comment for it however many pages ago it started? When he's going through the candy aisle, he's approached by some other dogs and yells at them. As you'd imagine, they're not actually a threat, and he gets to use his gun to scare them off. He returns home, and Ruth is very happy that she's got chocolate. Ruth also somehow has made a ham. No questions asked on how that manifested itself. The book is just relying on magic, and just believe me, bro, at this point. Now they're preparing the yard for planting a farm. By they, I mean Ruth told Knob everything that she needs him to do, and he complains about it, realizing that farming is actually really hard, but Ruth makes him snackies while he works. Oddly, there's a random mention of the boy and girl dog play fighting, and the boy dog always loses. And then we have a long explanation about planting and how it's hard, don't you know. Quote, Ruth brought me stuff to drink and eat about once every 2 or 3 hours as I worked. I always knew that she was coming because Rusty would run into the yard, and then he and Abby would start wrestling. Strangely, Rusty loses these matches more often than he wins them. After I finished the first yard, Ruth prepared a big meal for me. I was so tired I only ate about half of it. Digging is special kind of torture. It's really hard work, and no matter how much you do it, you always have more. It took almost 2 full days before I finally found a good method for removing the grass and was able to finish the last 6 lawns in only 3 days. Next came putting in new dirt, or as Ruth calls it, turning the soil. This involved breaking up the top 6 or 10 inches of dirt and mixing in the bags of soil that Ruth had me acquire last month. This was extremely difficult work. I always thought of dirt as loose-packed particles that could be easily broken up and moved around. That was before I tried to put that theory into practice. In several areas, the topsoil was too thin and gave way to orange clay. This meant that I had to remove all of the clay. Ruth had me put it in a separate area, saying that we might have some use for it later. I really don't like the sound of that. Turning the soil took a lot longer than pulling the grass. The first yard took about 2 days to finish. Then Ruth had me throw some straw over it, and we covered the whole thing with tarp. I'm like, what are we doing here? Quote, as we moved on to the second lawn, Ruth expounded on how great all of these vegetables were going to taste, and how there were few things more wonderful than growing your own food. I was mentally counting the number of ibuprofen that I was going to need that night. Just as a side note, after my first 2 weeks of foraging for Ruth's list, I started grabbing random bottles of ibuprofen because doing the stuff made me hurt. Once, while at a pharmacy, I thought about getting something stronger. I decided against it because I honestly don't know how to spell the names of most drugs, and I'm terrified I'll screw up and end up with some off-brand estrogen of some kind. So we're sitting here with Mr. Genius, who can't read a bottle of painkillers that says painkillers on it, and thinks that he is going to stumble into random bottles of estrogen. What is this? Like, for real. They build a greenhouse together, and he feels super proud because unlike all of his programming work, this feels real and helpful and something that he made himself. Ruth compliments him on his proud smiling, and he says that he's glad that she's around even if she's annoyingly positive. Nob decides that he wants to make a water pump and just intuits his way through it. It doesn't matter. You get a phrase like this, quote, I had to spend a few hours cutting a small groove to the end of the small pipe to get it to fit. This meant that I ruined several pipes before I got it right. By the end of the day, my second pump was ready to be tested. Okay, this is the thing. When you present a block and a solve in literally the same sentence, it doesn't count. He still got there without fail first try because it doesn't matter, because there were no consequences, because there was no fallout. He didn't waste anything. Nothing happened because I didn't get it the first couple of times. So it doesn't even count as a failure. And now his house has running water. He's now trying to capture generated power in a battery. So what's the next mission? Checking out solar manuals at an RV station because he expects to find them there since RVs have solar panels. Abigail's in heat, I guess, and he's complaining about how annoying it is. I guess I'm just surprised that when he got her, she wasn't already pregnant or showing signs that she had been a mother already, considering she had been a wild dog for who knows how long. At the RV store, he runs into a cougar and uses his gun. He gets away just fine. I say this, the story says, quote, he did get attacked, by the way. It's just he got away fine. It doesn't matter. He doesn't suffer. Quote, the wound got infected. I remember thinking of cuts getting infected as something minor. You took some antibiotic and got better. That didn't happen. My whole arm was sore by the end of the week, and I ended up bedridden for 3 days. Ruth made sure to clean the wound and wrap it in fresh bandages every 12 hours. I thought that I was going to die, but after 3 more days, my fever broke. After another 2, I started to feel normal again. 2 weeks after the scratch, I was finally back up and walking around. The wound is still a little crusty, but it's not as hot to touch anymore, and the swelling is gone. Ruth tells me that it'll likely scar, but after the 2 weeks that I had, I'm just glad that I didn't lose my hand. I hope those manuals are worth it. So it didn't matter. Again, it's just like the pipes where it's like, okay, you're giving this a difficulty. It didn't change anything. And it was solved in the exact same time that it was presented. So it doesn't mean anything. The fact that this book is a survival book, but it's all told in journal entries that are solving the issues immediately in the same chapter in which they're presented. Like you can tell, one, that it's weekly episodic and that the author was not allowing the characters to suffer for it to go over long periods of time. Like, oh no, we don't have food. Oh no, we still don't have food. Oh no, we're wasting away and I am so weak I can't do anything. Like you don't see anything that is just carrying over helplessness that is this desperation to be solved in the next week. It is all presented and resolved in the same week. So there is no tension. There's no drive. This character's not trying to do anything. He just exists because it's all taken care of. So he doesn't need to worry about anything. And the next chapter starts with, quote, for the first time in my life, I'm actually studying manuals. It's a weird feeling. When power was plentiful, powerful, I remember just taking anything I got and plugging it straight in. To be honest, before I had to figure out my own power, I don't believe that I'd read manuals cover to cover. So what have I learned? Why isn't he using the infrastructure in place? This chapter is him working on a breaker and explaining everything to you about about what he learned and how he learned. Bro also builds 15 windmills in a week, and it just reminds me of friggin' Michael in Avalon Timefall building an entire house in like a day. Maybe it was 2 days, I don't remember. He speedran building a house. Quote, it took the rest of the week and a lot of wire, but eventually I got 15 windmills up and running, keeping my others for spares in case some break or need work. Apparently, physical exhaustion, time spent getting and moving supplies, and his working on his own doesn't affect anything like his speed. It's just like, why are we here? This character is just showing off stuff that he shouldn't be able to do. Because it really hasn't been that much time either. It's like December, maybe January. The next chapter, Nob is saying how he only likes people when they mow the lawn for him. And that's the only reason why he misses them now, because now he has to mow his own lawn and he is so useless at it. He's complaining about being so weak from his office job that it's hard to mow the lawn. Bro, I have an office job. I can mow the lawn. It's not that hard. Why is he this pathetic? And especially when he's been building, he's like, my muscles, I can't move my muscles. You have been lifting and building stuff and doing manual labor for months now, at least weeks. And you're like, I can't mow the lawn? Quote, there are 3 major reasons why these old mowers suck. 1, they don't cut with just one pass. You have to go back and forth with it to cut the grass down. 2, they are not just work, but damn hard work. It takes a whole day to cut down the grass, and I almost got heat stroke the first time I used it, and it was back in March. 3, they require a lot more maintenance than I thought. I have to keep it very clean and keep the blades sharp or it won't work right the next time I pull it out, and that will make it a lot harder to use. So as much as this character like boasts how amazing he is and how much better he is and everything, it's also constantly being like, oh, this is such hard work. People should be grateful for the people who do this stuff, which feels like a lot of like, because it insults this character when it really shouldn't, when this character should have been building his abilities, building his strength, because he's been doing this for so long already. It's April. Quote, however, I can see what'll happen if I don't do this, or at least once a week, by simply walking a few houses down from my own. The grass in most yards is up to my calves. It's also really spotty and full of all sorts of living things. Abby and Rusty took off to the grass and came back with small rabbits, about 30 ticks. Ruth wanted to cook the rabbit for them, but Abby took off with it and her mouth followed closely behind Rusty. They came back an hour later without the rabbit, but they didn't eat their dinner. This guy is clearly just an alien, a skinwalker at the very least, and you know, calling him a skinwalker would be an insult. So no, he's just an alien. I don't understand how ignorant he is with, wow, I'm only just realizing what'll happen to my lawn if I don't cut it. Now all of a sudden, Abigail is getting pregnant, and I don't understand how he is hoping for a litter so that he can get a hunting dog, because neither of the other dogs he has are hunting dogs. He doesn't know anything about nursing puppies, and he is still complaining about being in pain when he rides a bike all the time and builds stuff every day. He would have muscles by now, but it just has to continue say he's in pain and how hard work this is and his body hurts because hard work. We're now learning that downtown is only 10 minutes away by car, 30 by bike, and he hasn't even tried to go downtown in the 5 months that he has been stranded. Like, he has not even tried to look for signs of life. So again, it plays into that lack of curiosity, that lack of survival, that lack of literally anything, that he's just like, meh, I would rather just build my own little power station in my house, 15 windmills and 2 water pumps in 5 months, then go looking for people in, you know, the most populated area to see what's up. Everyone he sees, he goes in only because he's like looking at the hospital or he's looking for books at the library. Was the freaking university not in the city? I mean, I guess the university doesn't have to be near downtown, that's fair, but it's just like, so everyone he sees at the hospital is dead, though mostly not even human looking anymore. There are no scavengers anywhere somehow, despite there still being animals around, but he doesn't see anywhere near the hospitals. How is this place also not raided during the destruction and the fall of society when everybody knew it was coming? Everybody was desperate. There's no broken glass. There's nobody having tried to steal medicine. There's no disasters showing in the hospital. Like, the creepy, scary thing about this is looking at the aftermath of what happens when society collapses. And there is no description of any of that. He shoots a baby deer and guts it, and he says that he feels bad for doing it, but he doesn't feel that bad because it makes him feel manly. When he gets home, Ruth is having dementia issues apparently for the first time. My guess is that Nob just paid so little attention to Ruth that he didn't notice any of the earlier signs, because now she's asking who he is, and she doesn't even know who she is or where she is, and that doesn't just come on randomly. She's had meds for Alzheimer's, but she has run out. So Nob says that he's going to go and look for some for her. She doesn't want him to risk it, though. Somehow, her medicine is, quote, the medicine she took could not be refilled at a regular pharmacy. She always had to go to the hospital to get the prescription refilled. Okay, there is, as far as I'm aware, there are no take-home drugs that you can get, and I say take-home drugs because you pick them up at the pharmacy and you take them home, that you cannot get at the pharmacy outside of a hospital. There are pharmacies inside of a hospital that they can give you those things, and then your pharmacies outside of the hospitals may have to order certain medications so they can dole out the prescriptions, but I cannot think of a prescription that you have to go to the hospital to get in order to take it home. If there's something that you only get at the hospital, then it is administered at the hospital. But it is not like a get it at the hospital so you can take it home. Correct me if I'm wrong, and this is specifically American medicine because this is characters in America, but like, this just feels so like somebody doesn't know how medication works, how scripted medication works. Ruth makes Bob promise to live his best life if and when she dies. It's kind of a big ask since he's never lived his best life before. She's worried about him going into the hospital and catching ill from one of the bodies and dying, and if he dies, then she knows she'll die because he is taking care of her. Meanwhile, she hasn't had any issues with him going out up to this point, getting infected anywhere else that he might run into people, but I guess that's because everybody is missing. And now he's going into the abandoned hospital, crosses a line. He goes into the hospital. There should be tension, but there's not. He just wants you to know that it's creepy and that there's no danger in there. He gets back with the meds and all is well. There's literally, it doesn't describe anything. It doesn't describe the interior of the hospital, the scenes in the hospital, pandemonium, all of the sick bodies. Like, it doesn't do anything. Complaining about not having AC, they harvest some crops. Ruth cans stuff and they eat. Quote, I was just about ready to do some research before I went to bed when Ruth called me to the kitchen. She insisted on teaching me how to make sauerkraut. I was going to protest until she added that she didn't want to die without my knowing how to preserve food. I think that she is using guilt as a weapon. Why is everything that anybody does with him when it is interacting, other than him being a complete twat that assumes the worst out of every interaction from other people, which you've got social issues if that's you, and maybe he just has social issues, but he is like months with this woman, with her taking care of him, with her doing things for him, and he's still like, oh, she's weaponizing to manipulate me. Bro, she doesn't want you to starve, but he thinks everyone, and specifically Ruth, is just malicious and manipulative in everything that they do, and it is insufferable. He has not changed in the months that they have been doomed. He doesn't even accept that maybe she cares about him. Why? Because he doesn't give a shit about her. That's how it comes across. They plant and harvest more. Stuff about carrots and potatoes comes out, and the dude is getting strong, missing french fries. Quote, Abby was now a portly dog as she seemed to get more pregnant by the day. I wonder why a dog that's pregnant might seem like it's getting bigger by the day. It's almost like little baby animals are growing inside of it, and it is getting more pregnant by the day. He's hunting deer and keeping an eye out for that large animal that seems to be around him, thinking that he sees something moving. Abigail is going to give birth soon, and Bob is being very annoyed. Abigail's going to give birth soon. Nob's being annoyed by what's going on, so he leaves to go and look at things. He decides to go and look for books on meat preservations at the local library. Of course, complaining about library architecture now. Quote, the biggest problem is I've never been to the place. I've seen it a few times, but to be honest, I've always kind of hated libraries. At least I did when the internet was still a thing. The city library is a 2-story building with 3-story windows. One thing I've always hated about libraries is how they try to fancy them up. They can't just be a normal building. It's like they need to get the newest architect who really wanted to be a modern artist and say, have at it. What is wrong with people designing libraries if they want to design libraries? You just want the box windows? Do you want some Soviet-style buildings for you? Just like some concrete gray buildings? Like, it doesn't matter to you. He also likened his existence to Fallout without monsters or the radiation or the danger. He also makes stupid comments like this, quote, breaking in is uncomfortably easy for a building that probably cost the city a few $1,000,000, but most of the people whose taxes paid for this are gone now, so they can't complain. Why is this sentence even needed to make an opinion about the building? Oh, I think this was a waste of money. Yeah, we know that you don't like public works, like the library, because you don't use it. Did you know, Knob, if that is your real name, that every building is easy to break into when there's nobody around to stop you? He is acting like building a library is a waste of money. Oh, and because he probably truly believes that building a library is a waste of money. He's such a terrible person. Everything's a waste of money. Just go die, Bob. Go drown yourself in the river. Stop trying to survive. Nobody wants you. Dude says, quote, I remember learning about the Dewey Decimal System when I was in elementary school. I couldn't explain it completely now, but I remember it well enough that I'm pretty sure that I can navigate the aisles. That's what I'd hoped. But there was one problem. There was no card catalog. This sounds like somebody who has never been in a library before. You do not need the Dewey Decimal System in order to find books. Why? Most libraries are marked with the same things as bookstores, where it separates sections based on genre, and there are markers either hanging from the ceiling or on the edges of the shelf that tell you what genre it is and what alphabet is in there. And you have like the nonfiction in one section and the fiction in another section and the videos in another section and the CDs in another section. And so then you just find it that way. And then they're arranged by the alphabetical order of the last name of the author. And usually there's a breakdown of stuff. Like I could find the manga when I was a teenager. I could find the manga in my library without having to do anything but find where they had the comic books. And then you just, oh, there we go. There's the section. On like the second floor, I still remember on the Lusac Library. And that was like a 4-story building with a separate wing for Alaska history books and all books related to Alaska just off to the side. So like you don't need the Dewey Decimal System for this. I just don't know why I just don't know why this is here. Apparently. Sorry, Tatum. It's like trying to make it sound overly complicated when it's not. And like normal people, including teenagers, don't go and find books on their own without a card catalog. Also, apparently this library specifically has a whole section devoted to specifically pre-fridge food storage. Quote, most were about survival skills. I found a book on herbs, one on off-the-grid living, one on pre-electric living, on it went. In the midst of the pile was a book on pre-refrigeration food storage. After a quick browse, I saw it had a section on meat preservation. Maybe it doesn't mean a section. Maybe it means a couple of books in the nonfiction camping/survival section. I don't know. It just gives off this feeling that the author has never been inside of a library and doesn't know what it looks like. While going through the library, Knob has found a spot with blankets where it looked like a squatter has been living. He leaves a message there telling the squatter where to find him with an address and everything. Good luck on them knowing where that is in the city or whatever. Quote, as I rode home, I could only think of the straps digging into my shoulders and daydreaming about who the other person may be. More than one of these fantasies involved some beautiful young woman showing up at my front door looking for refuge. I let these fantasies play out as they liked, knowing reality never flows that way. Considering he's so horny that the first sign of another person, he's like, bro, I imagine it as a freaking hottie who will just with me. Kind of surprised he doesn't make a move on Ruth. And don't be like, but she's old. Don't care. I saw a true crime thing from like a week or two ago, maybe a month ago. That was a 16-year-old that raped a 70-year-old woman. It does not matter. That's not what rape is about. That's also not what horniness is about. By the time dude gets home, the puppies are born, of course, because he didn't help with that. Because, why would he? We learned that Rusty is an uninvolved male dog who doesn't give a frick about his puppies. Somehow it's not surprising that's the direction that this book took. The women just exist to birth babies and take care of them and feed the family and clean the house, while the men do nothing with the family because they don't feel like they need to be involved with the family. Knob echoes this by complaining about how noisy the puppies are and how much it annoys him, and he wants nothing to do with them. Quote, Rusty is a disinterested parent, giving his small squeaky offspring little to no attention as he goes about his day following Ruth round. By the 4th week, the chorus began. I've never I've never been a dog person, so I couldn't tell you what breed Abby and Rusty are, but mixing the two should be avoided for people who like silence. The puppies clumsily chase each other around and bark. They bark when they catch each other. They bark when they are caught. They bark when they can't catch each other, and sometimes they bark in their sleep. I'm thankful I work outside. Or at least I was until the end of July, when Abby started bringing the puppies outside with her to follow me around. I tried to discourage this behavior, but by the second week of August, I had to train the dogs to follow me everywhere as I tended to the garden. Isn't he just the most precious Disney princess there is, that even when he hates the animals, they follow him around like a queen? He calls two of the puppies twins, which makes no sense because they came all out at the same time, unless he just means that they look the same, which that should have been said a different way. And the puppy that he named Lump. Again, he complains about the females being the problem. Quote, "The twins are more like their mother and are far more demanding than I think a dog should be. They are the source of most of the barking." So they're like their mother. So it's always the woman's fault. It's always the women are annoying. When Abigail has been nothing but a companion to this guy, and he left when she was pregnant. Rusty never went out with him, and I don't understand why this was the choice to do this. I also don't understand why it's Rusty on the cover and not Abigail, when Abigail is more involved in this freaking story. Because Rusty is the yellow one. Why is he always complaining when Ruth is taking care of him? When he is exploring the house... When he is in the house, when he is exploring, he finds a person. Okay, Nob realizes that they're running out of resources, and he's running out of stuff in the stores nearby, so he needs to go looking further away than the places he's been going. Pretty sure you haven't taken everything from like the Walmarts, the Walgreens, the Costco's, like everything near you. I'm pretty sure. I think he just wanted an excuse to go to Rich Man Hill, because that's where he goes. He goes to the McMansion Hill to look at the rich people houses. And while there and exploring houses, he finds a person, but they elude him and run into the trees, apparently in the rich neighborhood with huge yards. Nob is now mad that he has to keep doing a lot of work and thinks that Ruth is trying to keep him from looking for that other person who ran off. Why this is? I don't know, because Ruth has been afraid of him having to live alone and asked him to live the best life that he possibly could, so why would she get in the way? Why would she be jealous? And he's just like, she's just making me work hard because she doesn't want me to be happy. Why would that be your assumption when she has done everything that she could to make you comfortable and take care of you and wish you well? It just feels arbitrary, like hate and anger and causticness, and we are so far into this story that his opinions of Ruth haven't changed at all. He is just annoying and ungrateful and bitter, and there's no point in any of this. He's not changing at all. So what is this? What is the reader supposed to get out of this? That he's a show-off? That he's a bitter man cave person that just gets everything that he wants and then shits on everybody who wants anything? Because we obviously know that he doesn't care about family. He doesn't want family. He shut off life to his own family. So he's out hunting again and gets attacked by the cougar. Of course, Abigail is with him because despite how he complains about her, she's the only one that accompanies him when he leaves the house. The cougar's got him pinned and somehow is not tearing him apart. Abigail comes back, having recruited Rusty, who jumps on the cougar. How did he fight the cougar for that long without the cougar getting any further? There's some part in here as well where he talks about how the cougar like scratched him, but then only tore his clothing while he was underneath the cougar. So it's not like it was a far away scratch. It was like on top of him, scratching him, only got his clothes. Quote, "I punched, kicked, and pushed it in every direction, trying to get free. At some point, I jammed my thumb in its eye. It howled with pain and raked my chest with its claws, tearing my clothes. It felt like hours as I fought for my life." Turns out that Abigail brought Ruth all the way back, and also the person from the McMansion who is being called Claire the Feral. Of course she is, because... She looks over Nob's hurt animals and Ruth's wounds and says that they're all fine. They bring Claire home with them and offer her a place to stay. Quote, "Claire the Feral is officially living with us. I don't know why, but I hate everything about this." Quote, "Turns out that she's a redhead. I almost hate to write that I was hoping it was a woman we found, but Claire is not as womanly as I had hoped. She acts more like a deer than a person sometimes. She jumps at every sound. She's quick to run away, and as hard as it is to convince her to come inside, it has been dwarfed by how hard it is to get her to come outside with us. She also doesn't talk much. We did get her to tell us that she was a veterinary student before everything stopped. Apparently, she suffered some injury that kept her laid up for most of the year of the vaccine. She was attending school at the university 50 miles south of the city, but she won't talk about how she got here. Bip and Bop have taken a liking to her, and after a day of initial resistance on her part, they've taken up residence in her room. So, kind of unfortunate that the story is so unsympathetic that it doesn't allow her to be healed by being around dogs and being comforted by dogs. There are descriptions of her in this and suggestions in this that she was sexually assaulted by other men outside of this, which is why she has been skittish around people. But it also, she like in that first scene when you're introduced to her and you've got Claire and you've got the old woman and the dog and the cougar, she is not shy at all. She approaches, she talks, no problem. She's not avoidant of eye contact. And then all of a sudden in the next chapter, she's now completely avoidant and completely like, oh, no. And it, again, it feels like this is the time between posting the chapter and like posting the previous chapter and introducing the character. So there's no continuity, and then it wasn't revised or edited to allow a character continuity. And also, what amazing happenstance that she is just so happens to be a vet. Eventually, it's not really that long, Claire does seek out to talk to Bob, and she is aggressive, questioning him, says that people almost took advantage of her multiple times. Almost. So only almost? I don't know how it's an almost. You either do or you don't, and when society has collapsed, what is stopping you? These was that just a way to say that she was traumatized and has no way to trust other people without actually traumatizing her? So you just do this almost, but it makes no sense. Nob is just like, I'm not that kind of gross person, okay? And she asks who Ruth is. Quote, what is she? Your mother? Your grandmother? Claire's face scrunched up in disgust. Or are you? No, I said, louder than I meant to. I found her shortly after the power went out. She's been helping me survive. She does the cooking and most of the cleaning. At least she did, before she got hurt. Claire looked me up and down, as if looking for a lie. You two seem really close for people who aren't related. I shrugged. She can be a little difficult sometimes, but she's really nice. She ran a farm with her husband years ago. I don't like to think of where I'd be without her. How is she difficult? She hasn't literally done anything to be difficult. She stays at home. She helps you plan your homestead. She tells you information. And also, why does Claire think it's weird to be friendly with people that you're not related to? You can do that. That is such the bizarre way to interact, period. To be like, oh, you guys shouldn't be close. Especially in the end of the world, the end of society, that you wouldn't just band together and like find commonality when you're not dangerous. When someone isn't a dangerous threat to you. Claire explains, quote, Claire nodded her head. They call this city Necropolis now. It's where most of the vaccinated in the area were sent before the die-off. From the smell of that hospital, I can see why. I came here because they're afraid to. They think that they'll die if they come too far in. It won't last forever. They will find the place eventually. This news didn't trouble me as much as I thought it should. How bad are those people that you're talking about? Of course, Bob has no reaction to any of this because he reacts to nothing. Quote, Claire sat down on the other side of the fire. Some tried to trap me and make me a wife or a whore. After that, I did everything I could to stay away from people. A group caught me after that, but another group killed them for trespassing, and I snuck away again. Since then, my whole trip up the interstate, I was tracked. It wasn't until I entered the city that they stopped following. How does she know that Nob will be any different? Quote, so, the power was her idea? Claire asked. No, I figured that out, I said, feeling an incredible surge of pride. And the water, too. Claire made a noise that sounded like disapproval. What, is something wrong with that? Claire looked down. No, it's just seems too perfect. I haven't seen any place with power since it shut off. Cars and flashlights, sure, but no one with actual electricity. It wasn't easy. I spent the remainder of the time smoking the leather, explaining my electrical system. I touched on all of the intricacies and various things that I had learned. A few times, her mouth had almost threatened to smile. By the end of the story, I had moved the pelt to a table to flesh and salt it. So nobody else in the universe survive that can do electric work, that can make the power work and the infrastructures that are already there, and nobody else could just read the electrical manuals. Like, like Nob did to figure out how to do it on their own. He is one of a kind for freaking building power. We're really supposed to believe this. Also, how bizarre for this little perfect world created here that there are no other camps for survivors made by either normal people who aren't rapists or women who don't want to get raped, because clearly that's an issue here, and clearly there are guns everywhere so they could arm themselves. All things considered, I guess everything outside of Nob is worse, but is this just because it's the only way to make Nob look better, to make him look appealing because he is so terrible? Claire asks what he wants to do with her if she were to stay. He says to cook and clean, take over for Ruth basically, because he needs a new mommy since Ruth is going to die soon, wink wink, let's be real. She goes inside without saying anything when Bob goes in, and he thinks that she is basically throwing a tantrum because she doesn't want to cook and clean. However, when Bob goes in, Ruth is telling Claire how to cook, and wow, the meal is still disgusting despite it just being a stew that Ruth is leading her on how to make anyway, because apparently Bob can create an entire city of power and freaking water systems, but Claire can't build a stew with instruction. Quote, "You came just in time to try Claire's first dish," Ruth said, smiling at me. Claire looked over from the stove. She didn't smile or frown. She just regarded me the way a disinterested animal would and went back to what she was doing. After going to the bathroom to wash up, I came back to the dining room to see both Claire and Ruth at the table, a bowl of stew in front of each and one in front of my usual seat. Ruth had told me to take the first bite. I almost regretted my request of Claire when the food hit my tongue. It was the worst thing that I had tasted in a long, long time. I managed to swallow, and doing the best I could, I turned to thank Claire for the meal. She smiled for just a second and immediately started eating. The real work that day was choking down the stew. I don't know about you guys. I hate everything that is just an insult after insult after insult after insult. That all goes one way, by the way. They all just glaze him for being the king of town. Having women around is a pain in the ass, even when they cook for you. That's what this is saying. Women just suck at everything. So it's cold outside now. Somehow Nob's house is magically being kept together just fine though, even though it hasn't been worked on in a couple of years. The book even says that it's magical since it hasn't been worked on. Keeps referring to Claire as Claire the feral animal, yet Ruth is encouraging Bob to make moves on her, which is kind of weird when you regard her as a freaking pet. I feel like if you don't see her as an equal, as a human, but as an animal unable to think, you're kind of predatory if you're thinking of sticking your dick in it. Quote, "The two women are getting a little closer." Quote, "The two women are getting a bit closer, but Claire is a hard person to get close to, probably due to a year of living like an animal. When she speaks, she's unexpressive, and there's still a danger of upsetting her. When she gets flustered, she'll often disappear to her room for the rest of the day and not come out until everyone's asleep. Ruth tells me that I need to be extra nice to her and winks at me every time. I get what she's going for, but I had trouble with normal women before the world stopped. I don't know how or why she wants me to woo Claire the feral. I do catch her watching me from her window sometimes, but it feels more like being watched by a cat." Ruth is just being a freaking wingman at this point, and no one's acknowledging that Claire was likely abused based on what she has said and how she acts. Like, she literally came to live among corpses so that she wouldn't be sexually abused by the men. And when she said they tried to wife me or whore me, which was trying to force her into a sexual situation, either way, nobody talks about that. And I freaking swear, Ruth sitting here doing the wink, 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 go banger, wink, 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 is just as bad as the stuff in Guns and Smoke where they're like, "Bruh, go get some, bruh. It's the end of the world, bruh. You just did that chick in the woods, bruh." It's the same level of cringe. Your mom is out here going, bang her, stick your dick in her, give me grandchildren. This guy is also like, "Bro, I want a woman so bad so that I can woo her and fantasize about her. But now that I have one, I'm like, oh, woo, I'm just a small bean that needs mommy to hold my hand while I ask a girl out." Because, of course, Claire is not only a vet, but also an excellent dog trainer, exactly what they needed. The puppies love her. Rusty is afraid to leave Ruth's side because bad feelings, looming death, I assume. Quote, "Strange as it is, I'm starting to feel like we might actually make it. I've started the autumn harvest, and after teaching Claire how to can properly, we have more food than the same time last year. We've almost reached the year since the power shut off, and looking around, it's hard to count the number of things that have changed. How strange that things have changed and that you might survive when you have a bunch of windmills running water in a garden that's growing plentiful with a stockpile of canned food in your neighbor's houses. Nob starts creeping. Quote, at first, I could discount her skittish nature to having to survive alone among wild animals and living near starvation. I'm starting to think that it's something else. She's starting to fill out into a more feminine shape now that she's had a steady diet, but her fear hasn't left. I think I accidentally made it worse when she caught me staring at her one day. I didn't mean to, but it's really been a long time since I've seen an attractive woman, and now one is living in the house. Look, I don't want to just say that being attracted to a woman and interested in a woman is creeping, but the way that this is going is very uncomfortable, and partially because this entire time he just calls her Claire the Feral and thinks of her as an animal and doesn't try to talk to her as a person. He literally just sees her as something to put his dick in now that her body is filling out, and before that he was just like, what a freaking weirdo. He gets worried about potential attackers and starts building up a wall around his house with scavenged supplies. While Bob is doing that, quote, around this time Claire and Ruth were distracted by the goose eggs hatching and the little cute fluffy gray birds that they were feeding. Ruth was spending more time than I thought healthy teaching Claire how to care for the squeaky little things, but the two women had grown closer over the past month, and nothing I said would sway them on the matter. I don't know what he means by more time than healthy when they're taking care of baby animals, but also these women aren't at all into helping or asking Bob if he wants help or caring for the farms or like doing anything. They're like not spending any time together. They're just housebrows. Like they're not involved at all. Ruth, I can get because she is old and she's struggling and she's presented as frail. But Claire, even just to like have something to do, to maybe be around Nob, to maybe try to get to know him better with something that is low stress because you're actively doing something, she doesn't even try. This just feels like so dismissive. All they do is cook and clean and coo over baby animals. That's what it feels like. That's what they're relegated to. Ruth is expiring as the help that she has to give as a woman since there is a new mommy in town. I mean, Ruth is dying and not getting better. Nob can't help himself from insulting Claire. Quote, Claire isn't as bad a cook as when she started. It's also possible that I'm getting used to her level of cooking. How can he learn how to engineer, farm, and do electricity, but she can't possibly learn how to freaking cook? Are you serious? He just thinks so little of these women. For real, like there's no other explanation for this, that they can't cook, that they can't literally do anything after months, after weeks at least. She's had to survive on her own and she can't do anything. But he can build an entire freaking cityscape. He's also now having full conversations with Claire, though he's worried that she's not emoting. And he's not going to ask her about it, though. Don't worry. Quote, the biggest problem in our conversations is that her voice and face show almost no emotion. I often have to rely on her eyes to show if she is happy or upset, and that's only on a rare time that she'll look me in the eyes. Her voice rarely changes. I've brought this up to her. I thought that it was going to upset her at first, but her answer surprised me. She told me that living like she did taught her that survival wasn't kind to the emotional, that being weak, slow, or quick to anger or tears was mostly useless and often dangerous. She told me that the cougar whose skin now lies on Ruth's bed was one of many predators that would hunt her, that it took her about a month to realize that crying and shouting attracted them. After she realized that, she had spent months tamping down her emotions and focusing on the moment. Now, who she was before may be gone forever, and she doesn't know if that should worry her. So, does he not have emotion? Because, like, he's saying this is a problem with her, but then he hasn't emoted this entire time either. He doesn't show any emotion, any care, any compassion, anything but annoyance. And also, this is so freaking dumb. She is a veterinary student. She was studying animals, and you're telling me that it took her a month. It took her a month to realize that making noise would attract predators? How stupid does this think that she is? Is it treating this character as an idiot? Or does it just not realize how dumb that is as a whole? Because I can't tell. So Nob goes out hunting for more stuff, bargain hunting too, comes back with a bunch of DVDs, copies of the DVDs, TV, so when they have power and they feel like watching, well, they have power. So when they feel like watching something, they have things to watch. We're in literally Avalon Timefall territory here. It's big feast for Thanksgiving time, whatever. Movie with mom and the girlfriend, quote, after a quick cleanup, we retired to the living room. I was getting ready to start the movie Claire chose when she told me to sit. She made sure everyone was seated and the dogs arranged First, she made sure that everyone was seated and the dogs arranged where she wanted before starting the movie itself. Then she sat closely next to me. I thought her behavior was strange as she watched the movie in silence. Ruth watched the two of us for a few minutes with a sly smile that made me blush. She said nothing but turned to the movie, gently stroking Rusty's head as he lay on the couch beside her. After 3 movies, Ruth retired to her room. Once the door was shut, I turned to Claire. My voice was more nervous than I intended when I asked, "Not that I'm complaining, but why'd you choose to sit so close to me tonight?" Claire turned her green eyes in my direction, leaning against me very slightly and said in her flat voice, "Ruth wants to see us together." I thought making her think that we were getting closer would make her happy. I was right. A little upset, I said, "It's not nice to lead her on like that." Claire leaned closer, resting more of her weight against me. "Who said I was leading her on?" I stared back at her in confusion until she leaned in a little further and playfully kissed the end of my nose. She then got up and led the pups to bed. Abby immediately took Claire's place and lay down with her head in my lap. I stroked the dog's head as I contemplated what had just happened. He's literally needing a woman to make the moves for him. I'm sorry, but this whole thing is just gross to me. It's so pathetic. Mommy wants us to be together. Well, I guess then we just can't let her down. He 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 he. Also, it's further showing me in this book that the man needs the affirmation of Mommy Dearest and all of the women around him, that he has nothing to push him forward. Like, the entire book is him having the women tell him what to do, and he needs the women to tell him what to do, and he needs the women to take care of him, and he is not going to make his own choice. So, as has been happening for a couple of chapters now, Ruth is dying. Nob wants to go to the pharmacy, but it's the women that tell him to no, stop, don't go and do it. Claire is trying to get Nob to converse, and he sits there quietly now, and he is not speaking to her. Claire asks what they did for Christmas last year, and he tells her. Claire says that they should get Ruth some chocolate. Bob is like, "Bro, everything has been rated by me or Animal. Everything? You got all of the chocolate, including from Home Depot?" But hey, somehow there's also supplier warehouses nearby that no one has apparently raided yet, even people from the outside. It's amazing, magically coincidental. They have an entire warehouse to go and get stuff from. He finds this warehouse and everything that he was looking for, from toilet paper to cooking oil and lard and chocolate, all untouched despite the legions of mice that it describes being there. He heads back, and by the time he gets home, Ruth is dead. Then there's a speed run into making coffins, which he did for the first time, and he thought that it would take all day, but he does it in half the time he thought. Then he starts digging a grave for the coffin to go in, and he buries her, and then he cries over the grave, realizing how Ruth is gone forever and everything that she did for him. And then he writes her a letter saying how she was his best friend and he loves her. And oh, if only he could have said that when she was alive. God bless you, Ruth. I couldn't have been not a dick when you were alive. It feels very performative. I'm not dumb. So Nob's getting over Ruth's passing. Ruth obviously left him her belongings, and I mean, even if she didn't, her stuff is there, and who else is going to take it? Claire also has some secret book from Ruth that she is not allowed to share. I don't know why or what it is. It's never going to come up again. Bob's got Claire pregnant now and is literally a pathetic man-child. Why is it always people like this who act like this, who go like, I am big and strong and build everything, but also I don't know what it means when a woman climbs into bed and touches my arm. Like, woo, 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 woo. I was fantasizing about women, but like, what's it mean when she gets on your dick? Is like, is she interested in having sex? Because I can't tell. Quote, "If you leave us alone with a female long enough, well, long story short, Claire is expecting. Left with just the two of us, I guess it was inevitable. My next words will probably mean that I have to hide this journal from her for the rest of my life. She ended up sneaking into my bedroom in January. Me being unusually dim when it comes to women, didn't know what it meant at first, but then she gave me a clue pretty quickly." Even that paragraph contradicts itself because it says you can't leave us alone with women for long, and then said she had to make the move. So it's not because you can't leave him alone. It's because she made the move. She said, hey, let's do this. And I've commented this is such a fantasy thing, like a personal wish fulfillment thing. And it's not just in these, because I've commented on this exact same stupid trope as I hate it in like Guns and Smoke, where freaking Jesse is like, Bonnie, I love you. And he's just like praising her and doing physical things to her. And she's like, but he can't mean it, right? He doesn't really love me, right? And he's like, yes, I love you. How do I prove it? She's like, you can't. I just don't believe you. How can I believe you? And he's like, I love you. And then she's like, no, you don't. And then she runs away and she's like, why doesn't he love me? It's so annoying. I hate it. I don't care whose fantasy it's in. It's so obnoxious. And at the end of the day, with the way that this is, it feels like a way to get rid of how creepy he was being, but she's a fantasy sex maid wife bot. Quote, "There's no argument about the last name, and there's a good reason for it. When Claire found out that she was pregnant, she had the dogs hold me down. Then she informed me about the impending child, and with a line I never thought that I would hear, she informed me that I needed to take responsibility for what I had done, conveniently forgetting who snuck into whose room. When I jokingly asked if she expected me to marry her, she said yes. So that evening we had a ceremony in the backyard. It feels rather odd since all 5 of our witnesses have 4 legs and wrestled through most of the ceremony. Then one day, some random people come into town, come into the suburb, whatever, and they find this house introducing themselves as Mennonites. So I guess it looks like the good old farm folk, just like Nob has learned to be, have survived, and they invite him and Claire to come and live in their compound. And Bob is also like, this is my wife as a protection to her so they don't try to bop her. Anyway, that's it. The Mennonite dream duo introduce themselves, and they live happily ever after on the farm compound of other Mennonites. The end. There's a part in here where he goes, hey, are you guys Amish? And they're like, no, we're Mennonites. And then I looked it up. All Amish are Mennonites, but not all Mennonites are Amish. And the difference that I saw between Mennonites and Amish is that Mennonites are Amish. They believe in the same thing as the Amish, biblically and culturally, but they use electronics. So I'm not an expert on Mennonites. If you would like to get further into that, feel free in the comments down below to share what you know. But that is how this ends. And likely, if there is a book after this, then it would have to take place on the Mennonite compound. But it's like, I don't know what you would even do with that story. I guess then other than make outsiders attack the Mennonite compound. Also, I would just like to throw back to the preface of this book. With this isn't political. The story just ends with them joining a religious separatist society that is the only one that really survived. And, are not openly rapists. So there is that. Anyway, getting into the final thoughts, the final sections, criticisms of this setting and world building. There is no setting to this book. There is no world building. There's basically nothing to it. It doesn't bother to describe anything. It doesn't bother to make you feel like this world is lived in, because it's not. The people just disappeared. What you get, this is closer to like post-tribulation, because everybody is just gone. But even the tribulation has like bad, like worse stuff going on. What you get in this is one description of people dying from the vaccine, but it doesn't show anywhere. The bodies are apparently contained only in the hospital, not spread throughout the homes, not the streets, not other people that randomly just started dying, not car crashes because people had heart attacks while going about their work. You don't have animals anywhere. You didn't have them finding dead bodies of animals inside the houses because they couldn't get out when they were being fed. The only time the animals showed up is when they were being hunted. And you don't even see dead animals from those that ate the bodies of the infected humans, which would have also happened. There is also no expression here of any pandemonium, and somehow he also found toilet paper in the suppliers when we all know what happened in 2020 with the toilet paper. The book didn't do anything to build up the world around the story, again, relying on your familiarity with the idea of vax and COVID, while also doing a weird thing where all of the humans all mostly just disappeared without showing the outcome. So it feels more like a last man alive, last man on earth, and empty earth thing going on, as opposed to post-pandemic bad thing happens. Everything just exists to hand itself right exactly to Bob, down to the final supplier's warehouse that's there, and everything is perfectly intact, despite the mountain of mice it takes a moment to describe. The end of society is just magic. More like a rapture, where Nob and the Mennonites are left behind than mass deaths. And did this have mass deaths that included people in other countries who weren't exposed to the COVID drugs? We'll never know. It wasn't part of the story, which, whatever. But you would think that there would be like anything, something. And no, it's not this story. So I'll accept that. Characterization. Nob has none. Well, complaining. He complains that he hates everything. He had no response to anything around him. No questions, no motivations, no reflections, no desires, no instinct, anything. I honestly don't know why he didn't just kill himself at the beginning of this when he obviously had nothing to live for and no goal and no future. Somehow he's good at everything that he does the moment that he tries it, while everyone else, i.e. the women, fail at it because they just can't freaking cook. He had no fear of what was going on. He had no worry. He had no existential crisis. He had no crisis of faith. He didn't even try to look for other survivors in any way, even when he saw the sign that said, hey, don't come here. You're like, holy maybe other people are still alive, or is that an old message? We never went back to that old message. He complains about how terrible people were, but then the two women who do things for him, even getting him gifts, he complains about that too. He complains about how he doesn't have a family anymore, but he is the one that ditched his family, and he never learns to be better than that. He never learns to actually be grateful for what he had. He cries over Ruth's death after she dies, and it entirely feels performative because we never see him change. He complains about Claire's lack of emotional expression while he has zero emotional expression himself, and when she starts interacting with him to the level that he wants, he starts freaking ignoring her and not responding. He says that himself. He's like, oh, now Claire is openly talking to me after she is now comfortable, but I'm just sitting there staring at the wall, not responding to her. Why? She literally did exactly what you want, and now you're being a little bitch? For what purpose? Even when he meets a woman, who knows how old, he never describes Claire beyond saying that she has red hair and green eyes and that she has a womanly figure and she's really hot. He isn't courageous. He isn't courteous in any way. He doesn't consider the stories behind how she's acting, what she said when she says she's been assaulted. He's just like, doesn't even anything. He has zero response. He doesn't care. The way that this reads is that she and Ruth are not actually people. They're things that are there. For a little bit, Clara is an animal. You know, the cat in the window watching him out because she's not hot enough. And then when she gets hot enough, then he's like, wait, I could put my dick in that. But he doesn't see her as a person. He doesn't engage with her as a person. And this author wrote this character as aggressive every time she talks. She's either not talking or just aggressive. When she was working as a vet, where she would be compassionate, thoughtful, like where is the characterization for any of these characters? There is none. Except for Mr. Complainy Whiny Pants, who is just a bitter old man who thinks he knows better than everybody the entire time. Ultimately, there isn't anything interesting about Nob. He is with no motivations, no moral code, no desire. He's not a good guy. He's just less of a bad guy because he didn't force himself onto freaking Claire. But he's not a good guy. I just don't see, with no characterization in here, no character in a survival story, what is the purpose to read this? There's no risk, there's no nothing, there's no reason to follow these people. Now quickly, let's go into how the women are characterized. The only two other characters, because they're the only two other characters in this book, aside from the dog. And the Mennonites don't even count because they drop in all the way at the end to show him to the promised land. Ruth appears and gives him all of this information that he needs to get started on his little farm. She's an older lady who mothers him while also having all of the information he needs. With her being old, she's left at home so she doesn't have to be part of the story until Bob needs information from her. Bob spends zero time getting to know her or socializing with her. He complains about her being manipulative when she gives him gifts, and he complains about having to go out and do things for survival, never saying thank you until she is dead so that he can look good. The only thing that she asks for herself are chocolate and to go back to her house to get her things. Otherwise, every list that she gives him is to take care of him and the house, and he never appreciates it. He would have died without her. Actually, he wouldn't have, because this would have God moded for him anyway. What could have happened with Ruth is that in this small space where he is actually being forced to interact with somebody is that he starts missing his family, starts realizing how desperate and taken away from his family he was, that he did to himself by not responding to that family, and how much he misses what he could have had with his family that he was now getting to have with Ruth, because Ruth had all of these beautiful memories with her husband and her children and the farm that they had together that she was able to share with him, and he didn't have any of that because he distanced himself from his family for no apparent reason. So this could have had him have a whole look at his life and what he was trying to make up for, or what he maybe even realize what he wants, because he's seeing just this beauty in the life that Ruth has lived, that he has taken away from himself by thinking so poorly about other people. I mean, and that could have prepared him to have better interpersonal skills when it came to Claire, because obviously he has shit for skills. Meanwhile, we go over here and get introduced to Claire maybe 70% of the way through the book. She's called Claire the Feral, referred to as an animal multiple times, and dehumanized entirely. She's not a person to Bob, but an annoying pet, much like Abigail, who still Abigail works for him all the time, and the barking pups. Because she's not that hot fantasy girl that he had hoped for from his daydream. At least not until he feeds her a few times, and then she is hot and filled out, and now we can think about her differently. Her characterization falls into being a victim of suggested sexual abuse, being traumatized by that, and then fixing it from meeting just the right dick, that she wants to jump on. If there's any healing that happened over time, we can't see it from the way that this was written, so it just reads like another book written from the perspective of someone who doesn't understand women, going, sexual assault is just part of being female and you'll get over it when you meet the right dick. I have read so many stories that do that at this point. On that note, this book not only treats women as subhuman, but also has nothing but insults for them. When Claire is cooking, oh, it always sucks because she sucks. The dude gets amazing at every skill that he tries, but she, a veterinarian, can't make a stew. And then you got Abigail, who accompanies him on all of his searches until she is so pregnant that she can't. And is he grateful for that? No. She's just annoying and loud, and her annoying, stupid puppies are just like her. Bob can't even say thank you to Ruth or Claire for saving him from the cougar. Bob's out here judging the way Claire has lived, and somehow she's been living in a library in the middle of town where she should have been able to find other resources, and she is caked in mud when she could have found like a YMCA to shower in. But he's been fine out there in the suburbs all by himself. She has survived, and he's got nothing to say about that survival. It's just that she is weak. This book seems to treat women as a function. Ruth exists to mother Bob so that he doesn't die, and then give him all of the information he needs, the hints so that he lives to the next part of the game. And then when it's time to switch over to him having a wife to take care of, Ruth is no longer needed and she dies. Claire becomes the new mommy to take care of Bob, and the story ends, which is at 70%, so it's like whatever. The women all cook, clean, get pregnant, and take care of babies. They suck at everything else. Claire's also made as an emotionless robot person who is only skittish until she decides to stop being that, but also has no emoting in her voice. That is also contradictory, is no emoting, but also super skittish. Is she expressively skittish, or is she not emoting at all? I see stuff like this with the same dislike that I have for erotica that treats men as dildos for physical pleasure and emotional affirmation. This sees women as a function, non-person, for male affirmation. It's the same thing that you would find in erotica. Plot. There is none. Bob didn't want anything. He wasn't trying to survive. He wasn't trying to find people. He didn't even want to die. There is no plot to this story. It's literally just vibes. Stakes. Because there is no plot, because he has no drive, there are no stakes. This is purely fantasy and wish fulfillment to me. Bob is a shut-in who never left his house and was never in any danger. He fought a cougar twice, and if the plot armor wasn't obvious, it was the moment that the cougar struck him and only caught his clothing. For some reason, it decided to describe this fight in the journal. Well, the journal hardly described anything else in great detail. Writing. There's a way. Not talking about the writing of this book, there is a way to write journal entry style stories and make them interesting. This was not it. This felt like an outline with no personality inserted into the narrative, if you want to call it that. There is no prose, no character voice. The only thing to pull from is how the world revolves around this character and falls into place to give him exactly what he wants when he wants it, and no one talks about him being an asshole, and that's about it. You would think that there would at least maybe be some like conflict from people being so close together and being stuck with each other and then having to deal with that, but there is none of that either. It's just a summary all the way through with almost zero interaction between characters. To see a good example of how to write journal entries or letters as a style of story, we need to talk about Kevin is a great example. This read too much like a walking simulator, and many of the scenes read like it was for a word count. If it wasn't the redundancy in the writing, it was just something as pointless as going through the door was easier because I unlocked it from the inside, and when I was outside, I couldn't lock it because I didn't have a key. It also, one of the major issues with the writing in this, specifically on a technical level, is that it continually changed tenses, even at times in the middle of the sentence. I had a really hard time reading this, and I had to keep stopping, and I was like, this book isn't even long. Why is it taking me so long to read this? Why is this so hard to read? And then I noticed this specific. I kept like having to pause, reread, and was like, oh my gosh. So, quote, I searched around the compound for several minutes. I found a kind of garage with large trucks parked inside. A few had some of the large canisters used for the fork truck that I saw, and some even larger ones that were almost as tall as me. They were all chained in place, but were easy enough to detach. Most were full, or so I guessed, from the weight. After dragging them on my truck, I decided it might be better to bring my truck to them. Here's another one. Quote, there had to be at least a dozen blankets in the pile. It looked like someone has been sleeping here, either recently or in the past few months. I checked down the other aisles for any sign of life. So that goes, first sentence is past tense where it says there had to be at least a dozen blankets. Second sentence switches in the middle of the sentence from it looked, which is past tense, to has been, which is present tense. And then the last sentence is present tense. Quote, I check down the aisle. It should be either, it should have been, there had to be at least one. It looked like someone had been sleeping. I checked down the aisle for all past tense, or there has to be at least a dozen blankets. It looks like someone has been sleeping here. I check down the aisle. Not this switching back and forth when it is all the same thing. And since this is in a journal entry, it should all be past tense, not present tense. I think a bare minimum that an author should be able to do if they're publishing and asking for money for their work is understanding how tenses and basic language function. This type of thing is insulting to me.
One thing I would like to add to the insult that is the editing of this book is that this is enough for me to never purchase or give this author a chance again because it is so insulting to the reader. Not only from the way that it talks down to the reader, but from the lack of care put into the fiction, from the lack of care put into the prose. It tells me, why should I bother? Because it doesn't feel like the author did. And that's something that I don't think enough people care about when they are indie publishing is this sets the expectation that readers have for your name, your work, your what they can expect from you. And if this is what there is to expect from this author, if this is the foot forward that you want to share though at the public, it tells me not to give this author a chance again. It tells me not to waste my time again. And I think that's something that more people need to consider. Obviously, there are authors doing different things for different reasons, and there are authors that'll throw stuff out for different audiences who have different expectations. And obviously, you can just do stuff on all sorts of levels and find success depending on if you find your audience or not. But this is an automatic door shut for me because it is so disrespectful to the audience and to the art form. Go ahead and call me an elitist if you want, but I feel like readers deserve better than to be treated like this.
The story was also oddly reminiscent of Avalon Time, which is reviewed on the channel as well as featured, which has been reviewed on this channel, and it featured Michael, a super genius with a super high IQ and a photographic memory, who was sent to the Salem witch trials. I don't even need to go into that because I already did that. Bob flawlessly works his way through the building and everything without any harm coming to him, and when it does come, it is solved before the end of the paragraph that the harm is mentioned in. That's all that there is in this book. In the narrative voice, this feels like a mixture of self-insert and also, well, son, let me tell you how hard life was for me and the way that I existed so that you can be grateful that you don't have to do what I do because you're arrogant, you office worker. That's how it feels. Parts of this book feel like it is finger wagging and that the character just exists to be a finger waggy unless he's criticizing something to the audience. And that's all that I've got to say. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Thank you for going on the ride with me. And that's all that there is to say. So thank you for going on that ride with me. Looking forward to your thoughts in the comments down below. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? Looking forward to the conversation on the items that were mentioned. With all that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?